morning, everybody. Let's see how this is working. Once again, I'm Michael Millerman, live streaming, something I wanted to discuss with you today. Let's just make sure this is up and running. I feel like Scott Adams here for a moment, trying to get my footing. All right, it looks like we're live, which is nice. Good. All right, I had to have that open so I can see, because I'm streaming through a program called Ecamm, and I want to make sure I see your comments if you put them up. All right, good. Well, what I wanted to talk to you about today was this article right here, which I haven't read yet, so we're going to be reading it together for the first time. This is the Communist Party. Let me see if I can get that whole thing for you on screen. Like so. Yeah, this is an article by the Communist Party USA. Lipstick on a Pig, the attempts to prettify fascism. Now, I wasn't just sitting around reading the Communist Party USA website. People were circulating this article, sent it over to me because it has to do with our good friend, so to speak, Alexander Dugin. Well, let's have a look, shall we? Why should we be concerned with an eccentric Russian nationalist here in the United States? It seems almost conspiratorial, as if ideas and notions are driven by lone wolves and not social and historical forces. In Alexander Dugin's case, he's elevated by virtue of our circumstances, capitalism in crisis, and a burbling far-right movement. Is burbling a word? I haven't seen that before. Burbling. Making a continuous murmuring noise. Okay, fine. His rise accompanies a deepening demoralization among a section of the working class, particularly many youth who, facing a lifetime of global climate crisis, see their electoral efforts end in disappointment. This is precisely the nature of a bourgeois democracy, founded on slavery and genocide, a deeply conservative governmental apparatus that is lorded over by unelected Supreme Court justices and cops alike. For those of you just joining us, we're reading Lipstick on a Pig, the attempts to prettify fascism, blog post on Communist Party USA, just because I haven't read it yet. It has something to do with Alexander Dugin, so I was curious. Hello to those of you watching. The thwarting of the Bernie Sanders campaign by this apparatus dealt a severe blow to collective hopes and aspirations towards possibly reforming the system in a way that was more democratic. Oh yeah. Increasingly, our working class sees diminishing value in continuing the attempt to win more space for democratic power. Despite a record number of uprisings across the country against police violence last year, police departments saw their budgets increase. Migrant children are still in cages at the border. Other issues that seem to powerfully mobilize our class, global warming, healthcare, labor and voting rights, infrastructure plans, student loan debt, crash into a seemingly intractable brick wall no matter which party our class supports in the general election. They ask themselves, is bourgeois democracy even worth defending at this point? The urgency of the issues seems overwhelming. Rightfully so, they want to see these issues and injustices resolved immediately. Okay, just hold on. I want to make sure you see everything nicely on screen. Good. Good morning, Elogon. Hello to the 14 people who are here. We are reading Communist Party of USA's little blog post on Dugin. Where are we here? There is a growing number of people on the left who, on becoming demoralized, begin to doubt their political orientation. They see either action or inaction. Some even see the January 6th fascist riots at the Capitol as an effort to overturn the bourgeois democratic process, and they become excited. They see history in motion and think it's good news. They say that the worker is fed up with bourgeois democracy. What they want to put in its place is not perfect, but they imagine it could be negotiated on. Whatever this new system is, it must be better than liberalism, whatever that means to those who say it. All right, so these working class people are looking for some alternative to liberalism, some alternative to bourgeois democratic process. However, the January 6th riots were not supported by the masses. This is self-evident in that the putsch or attempted coup did not succeed. But January 6th was surely a temperature check of how welcoming the waters might be. And make no doubt it will continue to be a rallying point for the extreme right, and increasingly perhaps a wedge to introduce destructive ideas into our own ranks. Actually, January 6th seems like it's a rallying point for the war against, how could you put it? Not against the extreme right, but January 6th seems more like it's been used as a pretext to go against anybody who has any kind of opposition towards, let's call it Bidenism, to be safe, as opposed to a rallying point for the extreme right. But anyways, that's okay. We'll just continue to go through the article. And those of you who are here watching, we're discussing the Communist Party of the United States versus Dugin. Just going to go to the chat here for a minute. Hello, I hope you, Tavarish, will defend our comrade Alexander Dugin. I will send you many rubles. Okay, feel free to. I accept Bitcoin rubles as well as US dollar rubles and Canadian dollar rubles. I think Dugin's stupidities don't even deserve much attention. He's nostalgic of Russia's glorious past, just reading Heidegger and other philosophers backwards. Some people do think that. They think that Dugin has nothing much to offer philosophically and that he's nostalgic of Russia's glorious past. That's not my view. I've written a bunch of essays and part of my book trying to explain why I think there's more to Dugin than that. Sorry if it was too cringe. Offering to send the rubles, not a problem. Not a problem at all. All right, back to the text. Co-option of democratic struggles. Just going to take a drink of my coffee. There is, first of all, a disagreement about democratic struggles. The fights against racism and sexism, for expansion of voting rights, and for the rights of women, institutions, and LGBTQ people. From the point of view of a section of the left, democratic struggle is not class struggle. Some leftists think this because capital has cynically adopted cosmetic forms of solidarity. This is manifest in corporate pride months, statements supporting the Black Lives Matter struggle, and the Sheryl Sandbergs of the world who believe that women's problems might be solved by embracing capitalism and becoming the best manager one could be. All right, these are examples of the co-option by capital of cosmetic forms of solidarity. Confusion arises because corporations appear to be on the side of the democratic struggle, laughable, right? Using it to distract from what they consider to be colorblind, asexual class issues like power on the job, poverty, healthcare, infrastructure spending, etc. If we look under the hood of these supposedly apolitical class issues, we can see that they're deeply gendered and raced in their manifestations. But some who consider themselves leftists do not seem to understand. They think that liberalism, wearing its false solidarity with these democratic causes, is hiding behind people of color and women to continue capitalist oppression of the working class, even recruiting them into the wrong side of the class war. Because this co-option seems so entrenched, and given their demoralization, they feel that it might be worthwhile instead to build common cause with the right wing. Okay, now we're getting into the issue here for the Communist Party of the United States of America. They are arguing against their comrades who feel like it might be worth building common cause with the right wing. They want to reach out to the January 6th protesters, US flag in hand, to assure them that regardless of what they think about these democratic issues, there is still the possibility for a twisted, united front with the far right. So I guess what we're seeing here is, we're going to get to Dugin momentarily, but it looks like the Communist Party of the United States of America is concerned with the, how could you put it, national Bolshevists in its ranks, so the people who are leaning towards resources on the right in fighting their democratic struggle. You know, like seeing allies among the deplorables or something like that. Okay, we're going to go to Dugin's milieu in a second. Just want to go check on the chat. I have this going on in two windows, but you know what? Let's do it like... Okay, hold on. I'm supposed to have a chat showing here. Let's see. Give me 1 second, guys. I want to see the chat on screen. bot. How do I do that? This is chat. Oh, here we go. Okay, I hope you're seeing everything that I'm seeing. Let's put this up. There we go. So from time to time, I may have this up on screen. Okay, so is that working? Are you seeing that? Someone asks, is this on the Communist Party of USA site? Yes, it is. This article about Dugin that was released yesterday or the day before. That's what we're reading. Capitalism has adopted cosmetic forms of solidarity. Very true. These are communists? Yes, indeed. This is the official American Communist Party. And as you see in the chat, they're having a civil war of sorts. Why are communists even calling themselves leftists? Already failed, in my opinion, maybe. They're definitely hiding behind women, gays, blacks, or what you see there. CPUSA's attempt to out-poll the libs is pretty funny. Okay, all right, well, there you go. A bunch of nice stuff in chat. You know what? Did you even see that? Hopefully you did. I don't think you did. Huh. Okay, sorry. I tried to have the chat on screen there. Guys, I'm gonna get this down at some point. But anyway, let's go back to the article. We return now to Alexander Dugin and his fourth political theory, because this is where the strategy of uniting left and right crystallized by his ideology. But this polemic intends to prove that both this strategy and its ideological foundation are fascist. In other words, incompatible with the basic principles of the Communist Party of the United States of America, we could say. One could simply point to his milieu as evidence enough that he's a fascist, and a dangerous one at that. But it is also important to tackle his ideas, since they seem to be popping up all over the country. DuginCourse.com, if you want to do a detailed study of Dugin's book, The Fourth Political Theory. I also have a class on his book series, No Omakia, in my school. But it's true that Dugin has been on some interviews recently. He was on Jack Murphy Live not long ago for the second time, and you're going to see him on more well-known English language podcasts soon. So, okay, Communist Party of the United States is concerned that Dugin's ideas seem to be popping up all over the country, and therefore it's important to tackle his ideas to guard against any use of what they see as the fascist fourth political theory in a strategy of uniting left and right. All right, first, his milieu. By the way, those of you joining, we're reading Communist Party of USA's Lipstick on a Pig, The Attempts to Prettify Fascism. I didn't read it before the stream. We're just reading it together. For the record, Dugin's milieu. Dugin's works are translated into English and published exclusively by Arctos Media. The verso, so to speak, of the fascist right. I actually think that is not a bad way. I mean, initially, I thought that was not a bad way of thinking about what Arctos is. Or let's put it this way. You have a press called Verso that publishes all kinds of left-leaning philosophers, theorists, writers, critics, and things like that. And you could easily have wondered, what's the right-wing version of Verso? Why isn't there one? It's not like there are no right-wing intellectuals. So it was kind of weird that you had Verso, but no anti-Verso, so to speak, or, opposite. So they present Arctos as filling that role. It was initially founded by Jason Giorgiani, a Dalton graduate who made the circuit of Fordham and New York University before settling on doing his PhD in philosophy at State University of New York. He hails from the so-called metropolitan elites and professional managerial class that he would otherwise criticize. In 2017, he was dismissed from his position at the New Jersey Institute of Technology for being caught on video predicting that we will have a Europe in 2050 where the banknotes will have Adolf Hitler, Napoleon Bonaparte, Alexander the Great, and Hitler will be seen like that, like Napoleon, like Alexander, not like some weird monster who's unique in his own category. No, he's just going to be seen as a great European leader. He filed a $25 million lawsuit against the university for defamation and lost, as his writings about using genetics to restore the racial greatness of a nation, in this instance Iran, were considered proof that his comments about Hitler were not taken out of context. Earlier that year, he'd co-founded Alt-Right Corporation, a failed media venture with white supremacists in Charlottesville Unite the Right organizer Richard Spencer. I don't know enough about Jason Giorgiani to make any comment on what's being discussed here. I will say that his book Prometheism is worth reading and thinking about. Can't really comment on the other books. I'm not so familiar with them. Arctos is now run by Daniel Freiberg, a man referred to as a global leader of neo-fascists and of alt-right movements. They publish fascist philosophers such as Julius Evola and these other figures. To say that Alexander Dugin ended up at Arctos by mistake would be to insult the intelligence of all involved, including Dugin himself and the editorial staff who work there. It's not that straightforward. I don't know the story of how Arctos got Dugin on their roster to begin with, because when I started translating the book, The Fourth Political Theory, in 2011, as an undergraduate at the University of British Columbia, and my supervisor, person who was supervising my translation, that I was working with, yeah, you could say he was supervising my translation. It was a directed study. He said, have you ever thought about reaching out to Dugin to get this published? I did, and at that time, they already had a pre-existing relationship, so there was no question of finding a publisher. But I don't think that this reasoning or this argument, generally speaking, works, that everybody published by a press must share whatever you think is that press's ideological. Like, obviously, everybody that Arctos publishes is in some way anti-modern. That's true, but there are varieties of anti-modernism, there are varieties of right-wing anti-liberalism, and you can't put all of these thinkers in one basket. But okay, anyway, to say that Alexander Dugin ended up at Arctos by mistake would be to insult the intelligence of all involved, including Dugin himself and the editorial staff who work there. So this is a little bit about Dugin's milieu, according to the Communist Party of USA. A fourth political theory: the establishment of democratic, popular, and liberal systems, the embracing of colored peoples, and the dulling of conscience among younger generations are but signs of one phase in the process of subversion, says A Handbook of Traditional Living, a recommended Arctos title that instructs its readers to cut off all family and social ties, don't do that, and join up with a fascist gang of brothers, they're always brothers, to begin some sort of inner restoration towards action. By the way, this idea of brotherhood, there's a good book by Jacques Derrida, if you don't mind my recommending it, called, what's it called? I think it's called The Politics of Friendship. And you have an analysis there of brothers in their role as a political figure. Okay, Derrida's Politics of Friendship. Let's go back here. What action do they speak of? As with most fascists, the author gets a bit mealy-mouthed here. Hidden behind winks and innuendos is their tacit admission that fascism's main vulnerability is in its exposure, in the collective hell no, that rises up from working class and oppressed people worldwide when we smell any trace of Nazi in the breeze. Okay, let me see this again. Fascism's main vulnerability is the tacit admission here that fascism has a main vulnerability in the collective hell no that rises up from the working class and oppressed people whenever they smell any trace of Nazi in the breeze. Okay, we're going to read on in a second, but I just want to say something here. Probably the author is, now we don't want to prejudge because we haven't finished reading it, but if you think that all there is liberalism, communism, and fascism, and you're anti-liberal, therefore you see that the options are communism or fascism, and fascism is your enemy, just by default, all that's left is communism. And anybody who's not a liberal and not a communist gets just slotted, automatically categorized into the bucket of bad guy. Dugin's whole project is about asking, not his whole project, but a big part of his project is about asking, is there something that we're missing when we categorize all the political possibilities in terms of liberalism, communism, and fascism? And sometimes people who criticize his books just reproduce the very logic that he's trying to get us beyond. Well, anyway, let's go back to the Communist Party of USA's article, Lipstick on a Pig, the attempts to prettify fascism. This acknowledgement of the vast majority of humanity's outright rejection of fascism is important to keep in mind as we proceed to examine Dugin's ideas. This is precisely why he takes great pains to paint himself as anything but a fascist. By the way, my personal view is that this is extremely, extremely incorrect. You see, the argument here is that Dugin is trying to paint himself as anything but a fascist in order to bypass or avoid the effect of humanity's outright rejection of fascism. After having studied him since 2011 or so, I'm pretty sure that's not true, although you can see how that is how it might look to some people. So this is precisely why he takes great pains to paint himself as anything but a fascist, instead dressing up its grotesque skeleton, the grotesque skeleton of fascism, as some sort of fourth political theory. This masquerade is rooted in contempt for our class. Charlatans like Dugin think we would not be able to tell the difference by his slapping a new label on old trash. Those who cannot see or do not want to see the fascism hiding behind his conservative revolutionaries his yearning to embrace and defend tradition have some soul searching to do. All right, people who do read and follow Dugin might respond that communists who don't want to see the distinction between the fourth political theory and fascism have some soul searching of their own to do. The kind of soul searching that comes with carefully reading and thinking about our own basic concepts. Nevertheless, let's continue. Actually, I'm going to do a quick pause, go over and see the chat. Guys, give me one moment. I'm going between windows here. I want to make sure that things look the way they're supposed to look. And there's a bit of a lag between me reading on one page and going over to see on the other one. Okay, I'm just going to assume that you can see the comments on screen. Let's see here. Okay, honestly, I hang out with pretty left-wing people, and even they're done with the whole "you're either a commie or a full fash." Yeah, if you see on Twitter where the communists, where I saw anyway, this article by the Communist Party of the USA, a lot of people responding said, kind of like, cut it out. You know, Dugin's not the problem here, and he's not what you think he is. He's not what you're saying he is. And anyways, this isn't the fight that concerns us most. If communists don't account for multipolarity or try and tackle Heidegger, the foundation of philosophy in the postmodern period, they won't be able to assume position of class leadership. Maybe. I agree with you that it's kind of important to try to tackle the foundation of philosophy in the postmodern world, Heidegger, and that whether you are for or against, you still have to at least know what you're dealing with. You can't just ignore that there was Heidegger and his influence on all these various fields of thought. Some other comments here. Fourth political theory has been incredibly important to my understanding of how to interpret Marxism in the 21st century. Yeah, for those of you who don't know and haven't read the fourth political theory, there are chapters there that assess the transformation of the left in the 21st century and that offer a kind of division of the left. Orthodox Marxists, for example, National Bolshevists, postmodern left. In fact, yeah, it's worth reading. It's a chapter that helped me when I first read it make some distinctions, you know, because normally you might hear left and right or conservative liberal or fascist anti-fascist or fascist and communist. But one of the nice things about those chapters in the fourth political theory is you get some distinctions. You can see more and consider more in light of those distinctions. All right, let's go back. Guys, I apologize again for the chat comments not looking the way I wanted them to look on screen, okay? But I don't want to waste your time trying to figure that out. So let's go back to the article. Where is it here? Okay, hang on a second. I've got too much open. Oh my goodness. Sorry about that. There we go. We're back to the article. Liberalism as the main enemy. Dugin says that in the 21st century, there's no left and right, only those who oppose the status quo and those who support it. Yeah, that's right. He says in the fourth political theory that we're no longer thinking in terms of left and right, but rather the center and the periphery, or in terms of his most recent release, the Great Reset and the Great Reawakening. He clears out these historically rooted distinctions because of his intention to consume the left completely, to negate it. He wants to wear the skin of the Communist Party like the mystical huckster he is, to summon his neo-fascist demons. Looks like the author enjoyed writing this. In my opinion, it's an analysis that misses the mark, but okay. His book, The Fourth Political Theory, first and foremost, is an overture to the sections of the so-called left that Dugin considers salvageable. That's true. It's not that the whole book is an overture to the sections of the so-called left that he considers salvageable, but there's certainly a part of the book where he discusses what is salvageable on the left. Not only do these leftists fail to grasp the basic tenets of Marxism, but they also view liberalism, a word much abused in today's United States, as the primary political tendency to struggle against. The small d democratic struggle is embarrassing and shameful for them. They do not want to lower themselves to the level of the working class. They want to stand with strong, disciplined male stormtroopers. You know, I'm going to tell you something here in passing quickly, because you see, in calling Dugin a fascist, a neo-fascist, in talking about him as a mystical huckster here to summon his neo-fascist demons, they are, naturally enough, relating fascism to kind of masculinity. You see the strong, disciplined male stormtroopers, so the figure of the fascist man. And in fact, if you read the fourth political theory, you'll see a chapter there on gender as well as on political anthropology that makes this impossible. Dugin explicitly says that the figure of the male political soldier is not the main figure of the fourth political theory. Anyway, we go on. As spewed about on Fox News, liberal implies weak, pathetic, queer, educated, and girlish. Meanwhile, some voters who support women's liberation and are anti-war would describe themselves as liberal. Dugin associates liberalism with the Enlightenment and modernity. Yeah, we could just call it modern liberalism or Enlightenment liberalism. Or as he's done recently, liberalism 1.0, to distinguish it from the transformation that liberalism undergoes when it's no longer facing communism and fascism as organized forces. Dugin associates liberalism with the Enlightenment and modernity, globalization, as well as with gender bender nightclub patrons, homosexuality, and women drivers. You should definitely read the fourth political theory. He believes that liberalism is equal in its damage with both fascism and communism. Yes, that's true. He thinks that all three of liberalism, communism, and fascism are not what we need. They're all fundamentally erroneous, in part because of their underlying philosophical basis. But anyway, yes, he believes that liberalism is equal in its damage with both fascism and communism. This alone should give any reader pause. Wait, isn't Dugin supposed to be a fascist? You see, they're recognizing here. On one hand, we're calling him a fascist. On the other hand, he believes that fascism is as bad as communism and liberalism. What's the problem? But some of his acolytes claim that he uses the fourth political theory to discredit fascism. So what is it? Is he fascist, or is he, as a proponent of the fourth political theory, not fascist? We're going to continue the article in a moment. I'm not going to put the chat on screen. Let me just go there for a minute so that I can see if there's anything to address. Thank you to everybody who's watching. Great to see you, so to speak. Labeling opponents as demons is quite progressive and humanist, surely. Yeah, Carl Schmitt in The Concept of the Political tells you something about what happens to your political rhetoric. It becomes very dehumanizing when you think that you represent humanity instead of just recognizing the friend-enemy distinction. Honestly, okay. I already read that comment. Good, let's go back to the text. Oh, man. Here we go. I see what's been happening. I'm screen sharing, then I'm going over to the other tab, and then it's like Inception, too many windows within windows. What can I tell you? I didn't want to do a big tech setup today. I just wanted to get on here and read this with you. Cobbling together fascism and communism. What Dugin actually does claim, the article continues, is that his fourth political theory is made up of the best parts of communism and fascism cobbled together to wage war on liberalism. Partially true, not entirely true, because he actually does not only cobble together the best parts of communism and fascism, he also, quote unquote, cobbles together what he thinks are the best parts of liberalism. And secondly, this part of his fourth political theory book where he says, what can we, to use the language of the article, cobble together from liberalism, communism, fascism, he later says that's not going to do. Some sort of synthetic, piecemeal, patchwork ideology based on the salvageable scraps of liberalism, communism, and fascism are, that's not what we need. What we need is a whole new foundation, and that's where you get Heidegger coming in. Continuing with the article, though, what parts should be totally discarded? He says that for fascism, or what he alternatively calls the third way, since he includes also Nazism as part of the third political theory, racism should be rejected. He does not say much about why or how, but is quick to point out that it was racism in theory and practice that criminalized all other aspects of National Socialism and fascism, causing these worldviews to become the object of curses and vilification. In other words, had it not been for their racism, there might have been something in National Socialism and fascism worth considering. Indeed, without racism, National Socialism is no longer National Socialism, either theoretically or practically, and becomes harmless and decontaminated. Quoting from the fourth political theory. This, the article continues, is the ideology of the Proud Boys, who accept men of color into their ranks and are even run by an Afro-Cuban man. Racism is allegedly not tolerated, mainly for PR reasons, because our class righteously loathes it and is actively seeking its abolition, a struggle that communists must help win and defend from the likes of Proud Boys. Okay, wait a minute, racism not tolerated. So the article is claiming that being anti-racist is a kind of fascist strategy. That's not Dugin's point, obviously, in the book, and we can discuss momentarily what really his point is. And by the way, let me just say in passing, because they had said, where is it here? They had said, yeah, he doesn't say much about why or how racism should be rejected. In the book, Ethnosociology, published in English in 2 volumes, Ethnosociology, The Foundations, and Ethnos and Society, there's a pretty long section on racism and on why Dugin rejects racism in terms of cultural anthropology and ethnosociology. But we'll go down here. Dugin somehow insists, with no explanation, that fascism can be divorced from racism. Well, his explanation is that if you take political theories like liberalism, communism, or fascism, and you reject their core principle or something that absolutely makes them what they are, you reject it. In the case of fascism, he rejects racism. In the case of communism, he rejects materialism and linear temporality. And in the case of liberalism, he rejects the primacy of the individual. His view is that if you do that operation, the other elements of the political theory sort of lose their ideological charge. They become neutralized, and they can therefore just be reconstituted into something new. So fascism can be divorced from racism because when you reject racism from fascist ideology, the other elements of fascist thought, like right-wing Hegelianism, for example, suddenly become available again. This is nonsensical to us, is as nonsensical to us as saying that capitalism can somehow shed its racism. The anti-racist struggle, again, reading from the Communist Party of USA's article about Dugin, the anti-racist struggle is fundamental to communism. We understand that such a decontamination of fascism is not possible. All right, there's a very clear theoretical disagreement with Dugin's fourth political theory. Dugin's view is that you can rip the racist heart out of fascism as an intellectual operation that makes available its other constituent parts. And the Communist Party of USA says, no, you can't. Therefore, when it comes to what must be rejected from communism, Dugin says the first and primary rejection must be of historical materialism, along with, quote, materialist reductionism and economic determinism. That's true, he does say that. Indeed, it is only by discarding all of the above and embracing Dugin's fairy tale epistemology that one might somehow believe that fascism could be cleansed of racism. Well, Dugin clearly does not have a fairy tale epistemology, but we're trying to get a sense of what it looks like from the point of view of his critics. What is left when you cobble together fascism and communism as if this could ever be possible? Dugin tells us the point of intersection between different anti-liberal political theories of the past, namely communism and the third way fascist theories. So we arrive at national Bolshevism. National giving you the third political theory element, Bolshevism giving you the second political theory element, or here's your third way, here's your second way, which represents socialism without materialism, atheism, progressivism, and modernism, as well as the modified third way theories. Dugin says it's not so important to articulate what exactly he intends. By the way, you could find several writings of Dugin's available in English that deal with the meaning of National Bolshevism, including something not yet available in English because I'm currently translating it. Dugin says it's not so important to articulate what exactly he intends to modify about fascism beyond the racism, as the very notion of articulating the concrete elements of his fourth political theory exists outside the ideology's very paradigm. Perhaps it is more important to leave some things unsaid, to be discovered in expectations and insinuations and allegations and premonitions. Yeah, that's a beautiful sentence from his book, by the way. I know I'm going fast, covering a lot of material here, but I just want to tell you that in the fourth political theory, Dugin says we don't want to answer every question about what this theory is and isn't, because we don't want to have it turn into a closed dogma, which it runs the risk of doing. All thinking, which is always open to the question, runs the risk of becoming a closed dogmatism. And he says in the book, The Fourth Political Theory, that some things should be left unsaid, to be discovered in expectations, insinuations, allegations, and premonitions. All right, we're going over the Communist Party of USA's article on Dugin. We continue. This is the Trump agenda laid bare. His administration allegedly denounced racism out of one side of their mouths, while at the same time calling down the Klan and other fascist gangs to try and overthrow the bourgeois democratic process at the Capitol. You see what they're alleging? They're alleging that Duginism means combining a superficial anti-racism with a genuine fascism. And they're warning their leftist comrades, don't be fooled by this operation. These are the conservative revolutionaries Dugin dreams of. Make America great again is the perfect slogan for his fourth political theory, precisely because of his rejection of historical materialism. By turning history into a subjective concept, which he doesn't do, but you should see in the fourth political theory chapters like the chapter called The Ontology of the Future, where he does think about the philosophical meaning of history or about the relationship between being and time, but he definitely does not turn history into a subjective concept. Nevertheless, by turning history into a subjective concept and denouncing progress or thinking about the future, he insists that we are instead caught in a cycle of ages, the iron age of decadence and corruption we're currently living in, Dugin's angel politica, angel politics. Yeah, he does write about angel politics, believe it or not, in his book, as a golden age and a return to the Garden of Eden, the ancient paradise. Yet America will have to be made great again and again in this cycle, as this golden age then degrades into the silver age, then into the bronze age, which is characterized by the affirmation of wild and materially inclined virility, the spiritual element having now been secularized. Genuine authority no longer exists in this age, the age of violence and usurpation, only power affirmed by means of force. Okay, there's so much to say about all of this. The first thing is that what the author here is quoting from a different book, namely that in this cycle of ages, you end up in the Bronze Age, where you have this wild and materially inclined virility. This has not so much to do, in my opinion, with Dugin's actual views on the meaning of the future and of time and history. Anyone who wants, again, to see for themselves should consider the chapter in the book called The Ontology of the Future, or the chapter on the critique of monotonic processes. There's actually some thinking that we need to do to understand Dugin's views on time. It's a topic that he's thought about, lectured on, and made, to a certain extent, the heart of his work. Anyway, we continue with the Communist Party of USA's presentation of all this. This disorienting siren song to the left repeats itself at the close of the book. We have here, quoting the fourth political theory, we have here an interesting basis for the conscious cooperation of the radical left-wingers and the New Right, as well as with religious and other anti-modern movements, such as the ecologists and green theorists, for example. The only thing that we insist on in creating such a pact of cooperation is to put aside anti-communist as well as anti-fascist prejudices. So the fascists among you, put aside your anti-communist prejudices. The communists among you, put aside your anti-fascist prejudices. Why? Because these prejudices are the instruments in the hands of liberals and globalists with which they keep their enemies divided. So we should strongly reject anti-communism, Dugin writes, as well as anti-fascism. Both of them, interesting claim, are counter-revolutionary tools in the hands of the global liberal elite. Let's see here. I would like to just go over to some comments. Fascism and communism, both modern political theories that liberalism successfully conquered and subsequently assimilated into its metapolitics, hence the need for a new, authentically anti-modern political theory, writes Slav Morality. Also, in my opinion, the mistake when engaging with so-called communists is to take their word that they're actually communists instead of deluded liberal contrarians. The same can be said of today's fascists. Zaira, good morning to you as well. All right, thanks everybody for being here. I hope that you are enjoying this so far. And again, I apologize for all technical difficulties. In this formula, the formula that says Nazis and fascists should put aside their anti-communist prejudice, and communists should put aside their anti-fascist prejudice. In this formula, discarding both the left and the right and critiques of both, if this formula seems like a backdoor for Nazis, it's because it is, according to the Communist Party. Elsewhere, Dugin locates his intellectual tradition in the vein of Martin Heidegger, Carl Schmitt, Werner Sombart, and Ottmar Spann, along with other dissidents of National Socialism. You already see the disjunction between how Dugin sees these authors and how the Communist Party sees these authors, because he calls them dissidents of National Socialism in the very quote that they use, whereas they focus not on their dissidents, but on their Nazism. And it's clearly the case that you can't simply reduce at least Heidegger, Schmitt as well, and probably these authors as well, to their Nazi identification. He also embraces the National Socialism of Gregor Strasser and the National Bolshevism of Ernst Niekisch, saying they would have been brought into his traditionalist conservative revolution as a family, or perhaps be allowed their own distinct school of helpful thought. Yeah, in short, Dugin is looking for intellectual resources that do not fall into a very narrowly dogmatic version of liberalism, communism, or fascism. Dugin is calling in all the failed and chastened Nazis, as well as so-called communists devoid of modern atheist, materialist, and cosmopolitan tendencies. That's true as far as it goes. As communists, we know that history cannot repeat itself and that it's useful to examine it to help understand the present. Therefore, let's look back at the last time that such thinkers and thought were being developed under crisis conditions. I'm enjoying reading this article together with you. Let's go on. Capitalism, of course, is precisely what Dugin fails to examine in his 200 plus pages of disingenuous fascist apologia. Crisis goes unmentioned beyond the moral hysteria of liberalism's support of not only the freedom of abortions, but even the freedom from sexual differentiation, supporting the rights of homosexuals, transsexuals, and so on. It's true that he does not write primarily about capitalism, although in his recent interview with Jack Murphy on Jack Murphy Live, the question of the meaning of capitalism for the fourth political theory does come up, so you can have a look at that. While he dwells on the United States' geopolitical power, he does not take into account the economics of the thing, perhaps because he does not see the working class as the motor force of history. Yeah, there's something I could share with you about that, but I don't just want to tell you to go look up books or something. I think it's in The Rise of the Fourth Political Theory, published as an appendix to it. There's a chart, and the chart compares liberalism, communism, fascism, and the fourth political theory across a list of like 50 variables. One of which is their attitude towards the working class, or towards ecology, or towards whatever. So you look at that and you'll see to what extent the fourth political theory is like or not like liberalism, communism, and fascism. And it's true, I would say, that Dugin does not see the working class as the motor force of history. He's a philosophical supremacist in my formulation, and therefore he sees the thinking class as the motor force of history, or put more precisely, the philosophers. All well and good for us to rile up the workers against abortion and gay marriage, because the working class is not expected to do anything but roll over, drunk on backward ideas like geese being stuffed, etc., while conservative revolutionaries launch their attack, striking while bourgeois democracy lies floundering under its own contradictions, and while capital desperately reaches for its ultimate bailout, fascism. If we were to restate that, Dugin overlooks the economic component. He underemphasizes the importance of capitalist economics, and in doing so, he just pushes us further and further into the hands of the kind of fascism that is the bailout of the contradictions of bourgeois democracy. I think a person could say that Dugin does not write enough about economic issues. And again, I refer you to the conversation he recently had with Jack Murphy Live. That part of it that discusses capitalism will give you some sense of how Dugin responds to that claim. Dugin and his followers, continuing the article, fall in line with their intellectual predecessors. The Nazis exist, he is just refusing to look at them. I'm not sure what that means. The appalling consequences of this ideology are too well known, quoting Dugin, to dwell upon. He says of fascism, yes, locating its historical subject in the so-called Aryan race. To Dugin, the historical subject is more properly not the individual, like in liberalism, class, like in communism, state, like in fascism, race or nation, on their own, but rather instead a certain combination thereof. He wants to embrace Heidegger's Dasein, that of man as being, and tells readers to go off and read 9 years of Heidegger if we want to understand what that means exactly. Now, that's not something that every Nazi, neo-Nazi, or fascist does, is it? Just tell you to go read Heidegger for 9 years? So maybe there's more to the story than meets the eye of the Communist Party of the USA. When examining fascism, we must be careful to consider what is not said just as much as what is said. And by the way, for the Straussians among you, or for those of you who are learning about Leo Strauss, when examining anything carefully, we must be careful to consider what is not said just as much as what is said, because the silence of a wise man is meaningful. And hopefully we're reading wise men and women, let's say wise authors. Fascists are coy because they fear being challenged. For example, what of Dugin's mysterious and sporadic but insistent infatuation with fascist philosopher Julius Evola in the pages of The Fourth Political Theory? The article asks. He speaks of giving a talk in Rome 20 years after Evola's death entitled Evola, A View from the Left, but does not mention the content of his talk beyond suggesting that the left take a good look at the philosopher. In his address, he says that the various anti-liberal ideologies, including left revolutionary ideologies, should have a relationship with tradition, capital T. Now, if this appears obvious in the case of hyper-conservative extreme right ideologies, it's problematic in the case of left ideologies. Indeed, we leftists, now here, remember, for Dugin, in the chapter, The Transformation of the Left in the 21st Century, or leftism and its varieties, whatever it's called, he distinguishes several kinds of contemporary leftism. So when the authors here write, we leftists, this refers in Dugin's view or model to just one subset of the left, and this is the subset that is least of all open to genuine philosophy, not to mention to the possibilities of creative conceptual combinations. Indeed, we leftists are allergic to the kind of ideology Evola proclaims: racism, casteism, sexism, anti-Semitism, mysticism, and anti-democracy in the name of embracing and protecting tradition. Okay, we're going to continue in a second, but I want to just say something. First of all, thank you, those of you who are here. I obviously don't see you, but it's great to see you, to be with you. And we're reading Communist Party of USA's article, Lipstick on a Pig, The Attempts to Prettify Fascism, where they are warning their comrades against succumbing to the temptations of Alexander Dugin's call to cross the aisle and shake hands with fascist anti-liberals. That's how they see it. So let's go back to the article. Leftists shedding historical materialism. We would like to think that all can smell the fourth political theory for what it is, which, as you see, for them is just straight up fascism, not anything distinct from fascism, therefore not a fourth, but rather just the third political theory. But the very necessity of this essay indicates that it's not the case. This writing comes from a desire to differentiate ourselves from fascism, and not just to each other, but to our class. Swept up in a torrent of racism, sexism, and mystical conspiracies, thousands of Americans laid siege to the Capitol earlier this year, and they may do it again. With Joe Biden as the creaking facade of a crumbling liberal order, there are some who would call themselves communists that see value in joining with the far right to smash liberalism once and for all. We should have been there on January 6th, they cry, being sucked into the ahistorical web Dugin has spun. That's interesting. I actually did not know before reading this article that there were communists who felt that they should have been there on January 6th. They fall into his lies because they have, perhaps unwittingly, shed the materialist and modernist aspects of communism that Dugin rightfully sees as preventing its marriage to the extreme right. There's desperation here, a real fear of the future married to demoralization. This again is because some on the left have abandoned the core value of Marxism, which is precisely found in its method of historical materialism. So the very thing that Dugin thinks we need to reject from communism in order to make it possible to reappropriate what's philosophically interesting and politically relevant about communism is the thing that Communist Party of the USA wants to double down on. These people on the left, have lost faith in our class and now see it as Trump and Bannon and Tucker Carlson tell them it is, white, male, and reactionary. So they've soured on, let's say, they've soured on the American left and are beginning to make common cause with the deplorables. In accepting this fantasy, they cut themselves off from both our history and the reality of our struggle. Okay, very interesting and much worth thinking about. Dugin claims that his fourth political theory is the only theory that is capable of mobilizing the vast masses throughout the world. Yeah, actually, the claim is that when you had liberalism, communism, and fascism, you had three ideologies that were doing this. They were capable of mobilizing the vast masses throughout the world. And when liberalism was the last ideology standing, the only thing that was left to oppose it was all kind of marginal little carnivalesque movements. Nothing that could pose a serious threat to global liberalism. So one part of the logic of the fourth political theory is to bring together enough factions that could pose a genuine political threat to global liberalism. All right, Dugin claims that his fourth political theory is the only theory capable of mobilizing the vast masses throughout the world, and some on the left believe him. They crave engagement and validation from all the wrong places. They accept the erroneous idea that culture war and class war are two different things because it seems like a good way to rally the masses. They accept Fox News lies about Black Lives Matter being a liberal hashtag. They embrace the trans panic. They say we must tolerate socially conservative views without explaining to their comrades exactly which views we, their Black and brown and women and trans and queer and disabled and immigrant comrades, are supposed to tolerate. They say that we can go back in time to restore our party to greatness by wrapping it in the US flag and watching our tone. To say we're out to protect and embrace tradition, to say that we should tolerate backward ideas in an effort to build a unified front against liberalism is not just ahistorical, it's fatal. It assumes that the progress made over the past 75 years is liberal in nature, as opposed to hard fought for by communists and other progressive elements in the working class. It drives a wedge between communists and our base of support, which is not some idealistic Dasein, but the working class and oppressed. This separation is ultimately a betrayal of the lives we fight for, since fascism fills its camps and cannon fodder armies with our class, and that includes us, the left. Okay, so we have been reading this article by Taryn Fivek, published at the Communist Party of USA's website, cpusa.org. It was published December 22nd. It's called Lipstick on a Pig, The Attempts to Prettify Fascism. And as you saw, it is a cautionary note to fellow travelers on the left not to get seduced by Dugin's rhetoric or by the temptation that arises from a feeling of, how did he put it down here? Hold on. This was kind of nicely said. Let's go down to, demoralization, not to succumb to the temptation, which is a function of desperation and demoralization, to cross the aisle and make common cause with deplorables. Now, I'm not telling you that I agree or disagree. I made some commentary throughout the text on the basis of my knowledge of the book, which I urge you to read if this is an interesting topic for you, and to study other parts of Dugin's thought. And there you go. I enjoyed walking you through that article, reading it together with you. Thank you to those of you who sent it over to me. And now, can I just check in on the chat? A Logon is writing, so this person is just complaining about actual ideological Marxist in the Communist Party of USA. Stas, I recall that Russian Orthodox Church published a paper criticizing his views, criticizing Dugin's views. Yes, there's something like that. So I'm not going to go through all these comments in the chat. Again, I apologize for technological difficulties I had earlier. And guys, I'm just going to try to do more such live streams from time to time. What's this? Critical theory just wrecked American communists, absolutely bulldozed the entire movement. Amazing to see. Well, if you liked the article, you can definitely say something about it online, maybe make a comment. what you agree with or disagree with. I don't mean on my video, I mean on the article blog page. Of course, you're happy to comment on the video as well. Please share this with anybody you think might find it interesting. I have courses on Dugin at millermanschool.com, including a course on the fourth political theory. And until the next video, take care, be well, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, see you later, bye.